Hello everyone, I'm Grainwolf and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're looking at 5 of the most fascinating Paleolithic sites in the archaeological record, places that offer real insight into the world, lives and story of our early ancestors. So whether you're new to prehistory or have a long-standing interest, I hope this selection gives you something to think about. Without further delay, here are 5 Paleolithic sites you might not have heard of. It's hard to think of anything that captures the Stone Age more vividly than paintings drawn by torchlight on the walls of a cave. Chauvet Cave, rediscovered in 1994 near the Ardèche River in southern France, holds some of the oldest known examples of figurative art anywhere in the world. The images were drawn using charcoal, and radiocarbon dating of both the pigments and nearby torch marks places them at between 32,000 and 30,000 years old. The people who created them belonged to the Aurignacian culture, the first widespread modern human tradition in Ice Age Europe. More than 400 animal figures appear across the cave's chambers. Many were drawn in black, while others were shaded, using ochre, and follow the natural contours of the cave walls. Cave lions, woolly rhinoceros, mammoth and bears appear alongside horses and aurochs, forming an unusual mix of both predator and prey. This range of species, especially the inclusion of large carnivores, sets Chauvet apart from most other decorated Ice Age caves. There's no evidence that the cave was used as a dwelling, as no hearths or food remains have been found, and the layout of the chambers would have made regular occupation difficult. Despite this, soot from burning torches still stains the ceilings, and on the cave floor a set of human footprints remains preserved in hardened clay. These tracks, which were made by a child, were left sometime between 32,000 and 26,000 years ago, which means the cave may have been visited, or its images revered, for several thousand years. Far to the north of modern-day Iraq, high in the foothills of the Zagros Mountains, there is a cave that once overlooked a colder, greener world. The land would have been quieter then, scattered herds, less forest, and long corridors of open steppes sweeping across the uplands. At times snow covered the slopes, at others thawed valleys fed streams and allowed animals to graze along the ridgelines. Somewhere in this landscape, a group of Neanderthals moved across the hills, hunting, sheltering, and returning to the same places over generations. One of them was a man now known as Shanidar I. He would have lived and died more than 45,000 years ago, and the life he lived was not an easy one. His skull shows signs of trauma. A wound on the left side of his head, probably sustained when he was young, had damaged his eye socket and may have impaired his hearing. His right arm had withered and stopped growing, the bones terminating above the elbow. His right foot also shows signs of damage or disease. Despite all this, he survived into what we would consider late adulthood. It's difficult to imagine him hunting or foraging on his own. Walking would have been painful. He may have struggled to keep up with the group or to contribute directly. And yet he lived, for years, perhaps decades. Someone must have fed him, kept him warm, helped him through infection and injury. Whether that care was constant or occasional isn't clear, but it was enough. When he died, his body seems to have been laid in a shallow depression in the floor of a cave. The position of his skeleton and the undisturbed sediment around it suggest purposeful burial. He wasn't dragged in or left where he fell. His body was placed, intentionally and with care. He was rediscovered in 1957, during excavations led by Ralph Solecki. Over the next several seasons, Solecki's team uncovered the partial remains of at least 10 Neanderthal individuals in the same area of the cave, some of whom also showed signs of careful placement. For decades, this site has stood at the centre of debates about Neanderthal social life, and what it meant to bury the dead. Neanderthals have long been portrayed in popular culture as something less than human, as lumbering, slow-witted brutes with clubs and growls, living short lives in dark places. But this image is falling apart. Excavations at Shanidar and elsewhere have revealed a population that was capable of cooperation, of foresight, and possibly even of symbolic behaviour. They knew their environment well. They used fire, hunted in coordinated groups, and cared, in some way, for those who could no longer care for themselves. Shanidar I wasn't exceptional in his injuries. What made him stand out is that he survived them, and when he died, someone placed his body in a cave where others had been placed before. That decision, however simple or practical it may have been, is hard to ignore. Roughly 14,700 years ago, Britain was passing through a short-lived window of warmth known as the Late Glacial Interstadial. After thousands of years of cold, ice sheets had drawn back from much of the land, leaving behind open grasslands, fast rivers, and scattered pockets of woodland. Herds of red deer, wild horses, and aurochs grazed across this exposed landscape, and into it came bands of hunter-gatherers following seasonal movements of game. These people belonged to what archaeologists refer to as the Magdalenian culture, a tradition known from across Western Europe for its engraved tools, carved antler, and cave art, though in Britain, no painted caves have yet been found. During this period, Britain was still connected to the European mainland. Sea levels were far lower than they are today, and what's now the Bristol Channel was part of an inland valley. In the area of modern-day Somerset, Cheddar Gorge would have looked very different to the wooded slopes visible now. Its limestone cliffs framed a broad open corridor, and at the base of the gorge lay a network of caves that provided shelter, storage, and gathering places. These weren't long-term settlements, but sites returned to again and again, often seasonally, by groups moving through the landscape. One of the most significant of these is Gough's Cave. Excavations here have revealed occupation layers dating to the end of the last ice age, along with stone tools, butchered animal bones, and worked human remains. It's the human material that has drawn the most attention, and raised the most questions. At least 6 individuals are represented by the bones found within the Magdalenian levels of Gough's Cave. Most of the remains are fragmentary, but include skulls, jaws, long bones, and children's teeth. What stands out is the pattern of modification. Human bones were cut, scraped, and broken open in ways that mirror the treatment of animal carcasses found nearby. Long bones were split to access marrow, jaws show signs of scalping or skinning, and the skulls were carefully shaped, not smashed, but intentionally worked into open, cup-like forms. Some of these even bear fine incisions or engraved lines, made after the skulls had been cleaned. There is no clear evidence of formal burial. The bodies were disarticulated, processed, and used, in what appears to have been a structured and repeated practice. Whether this was ritual cannibalism, carried out to honour the dead, or a practical response to hunger during times of scarcity, remains uncertain. The defleshing is methodical. The skull cups are finely made. It suggests intent, not desperation. For years, the assumption has been that hunter-gatherer societies in the Paleolithic were mostly egalitarian, small mobile groups sharing food, tools, and responsibility without much hierarchy. It's a model that fits well in many cases. There's little evidence for private wealth, no permanent dwellings, and most burials from the period are simple, if they exist at all. But like most broad assumptions about the past, this one has exceptions. The site of Sunghir in western Russia is one of them. Located on the edge of a river terrace about 200 kilometers northeast of modern-day Moscow, Sunghir was first excavated in the 1950s. Radiocarbon dating places at around 32,000 years ago, during the height of the Gravettian period in Europe. This was a cold, dry phase of the Ice Age. The land around the camp would have been a mixture of open tundra and steppe, dotted with low shrubs and scattered groves. Reindeer, mammoth, and horse moved through the region, and the people who lived here followed them. The site produced a number of burials, some partial, others more elaborate. For this section, we'll focus on 3 individuals, an adult man and 2 children, buried close together but in separate graves. What sets these burials apart isn't just the preservation, it's the extraordinary level of effort that went into preparing them. The adult, a man in his 40s, was laid out on his back and covered in red ochre, with a carefully arranged set of mammoth ivory beads sewn into his clothing. Thousands of them, each carved, shaped, and drilled before being stitched into place. He also wore fox-tooth pendants, and ivory armbands had been placed around his wrists. 2 large ivory spears, finely worked but unused, were laid beside him. Nearby, the 2 children, both boys, around 10 and 12 years old, were buried head to head in a single grave. They too were covered in beads, and each had their own set of grave goods, decorative items, pierced animal teeth, a carved disc, and in one case, a femur shaft packed with ochre and placed between the bodies. The level of ornamentation on the children is almost identical to that of the adult, and in both cases, the scale of work involved is difficult to overstate. It's estimated that preparing and sewing the beadwork alone would have taken hundreds of hours. There's something else as well. Both of the children had physical conditions that would have affected them in life. One had a severe deformation in the leg bones, possibly congenital, that would have made walking difficult. The other had cranial features that suggest a developmental disorder. These weren't robust young hunters buried after a tragic accident. They were individuals whose lives had been visibly different from the norm, and yet they were given the full ceremonial treatment. It's difficult to say exactly what this means. The scale of investment, the symbolic elements, and the choice of who was buried suggest that this group didn't treat all its members equally. Whether that inequality was based on lineage, ritual status, or something else entirely is impossible to know. But Sunghir doesn't look like the burial ground of a flat society. It looks like one where some people were set apart even in death. For decades, the origin of our species was thought to lie in East Africa around 200,000 years ago. That model has since shifted. The discovery of human remains at Jebel Irhoud in modern-day Morocco has pushed that timeline back by over 100,000 years and placed the emergence of Homo sapiens not in one region, but across a broader range of the African continent. Jebel Irhoud is a collapsed cave situated on the northern flanks of the Atlas Mountains. Originally opened by miners in the 1960s, the site yielded a human skull and a brow ridge fragment alongside Middle Stone Age tools. These early finds were first misdated to about 40,000 years ago, until more recent excavations, beginning in the early 2000s, allowed researchers to establish the true age of the layers. Thermoluminescence dating of heated flint artifacts from controlled hearths placed the site at around 315,000 years ago, making it the oldest known context for anatomically Homo sapiens fossils anywhere in the world. Recalibrated ESR dating of teeth from the same layers produced a consistent range between 280,000 and 350,000 years ago. The material includes the partial remains of at least 5 individuals, 3 adults, 1 adolescent and 1 child. The skulls show a fully modern face, with reduced brow ridges, flat cheeks, and a small tucked-in jaw. But the brain cases are more elongated than in modern humans, suggesting that cranial globularity, one of the defining features of recent Homo sapiens, had not yet fully developed. One child, around 7 or 8 years old, preserved enough dental growth to determine that tooth enamel formed at a pace identical to modern children, indicating a similar pattern of development. The rest of the postcranial bones, including parts of the pelvis, femur and ribcage, show a human body form well suited for life in open terrain. I hope you found these 5 sites interesting. That'll be it for this video, but there's more to come. I'll be covering a range of prehistoric topics in future episodes, from the earliest human ancestors through to the Bronze Age. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, feel free to follow the channel and keep an eye out for upcoming videos. As always, I've been Grain Wolf, and thanks for watching.